So my name is Jim Fenton. I'm the director of the Florida Solar Energy Center. So I'm going to talk to you today about the fact that you should vote for me because I can deliver to you $1.08 a gallon today. I can do it to you for today. And none of the two candidates you're going to vote to are anywhere close. Okay? Nor do they even have a plan to get there. Okay? And as I was saying, is electric motors are a lot of the way to go. Some of the issues that we've dealt with in the past is we're concerned, for the last 25 years, while our miles per gallon has stayed at about 25 miles per gallon on the roads, we have moved the automobile to twice the weight it was 25 years ago and twice the horsepower, and still be able to maintain that same miles per gallon. Okay. The other interesting things that are come out about is that about 80% of the vehicle miles traveled throughout the United States in an automobile is for a trip that's less than 40 miles. Now we're concerned all about range anxiety, but these electric plug-ins, whether they be something like the Volt that has a range extender or a Nissan Leaf or the other cars that are out there, have the ability of fossil fuels. You just do it. Okay? In Florida, about 26% of our vehicles are small cars, the kind of cars you use for commuting. Okay, so if you had a plan and your goal was to maybe replace all the small cars in Florida, what would it take? Well, those small cars typically use about 3 kilowatt hours to run a mile. The average car does 12,000 miles, so that's 4,000 kilowatt hours roughly per year per car. And if you were to switch them all over to electricity, you'd save 1.4 billion gallons of gasoline. Just in the state of Florida, just by switching that over. Okay, if you were going to go ahead and run that off of today's residential price of electricity from PV on your roof, so pay for that expensive renewable electricity, and then compare that to the cost of gasoline, we'd save $2.6 billion a year, switching from gasoline to expensive photovoltaics. Okay, now how much photovoltaics do I need? The equivalent of about 4 coal power plants worth. It's only be 2% of the electricity in the state of Florida, by the way. Okay? So you look at this and you say, well, you can pull it off. Now everybody comes back to me and says, yeah, but those electric cars are too expensive. Yeah, the trade-off is now about 5 years. Most people finance their car for 5 years. So by the time you've done financing your car over 5 years, you've paid it all back in your fuel efficiency savings. So we can do this. A lot of interesting things have been happening. Price of fossil fuels have been going up. Price of renewables have been going down. The question everybody asks is when? Well, way back when, in this time period of time, and this is a scale here of the average selling price of an actual panel, so this would be for a peak watt. You know, back in the 70s and 80s, okay, it cost a fortune. Okay? Here is with crystal and silicon. As we produced more, the economy of scales moved up, the volumes and so forth, the prices dropped. And our goal with the President's Sunshot program was to get to the point where we'd have an installed watt of photovoltaics. This is actually installed, not just the module cost, at $1 a watt. And the thought then was that in order to install a PV panel at $1 a watt, the module would cost 50 cents and it would cost 50 cents for the other kind of activities. And we thought maybe we might get to that in the year 2020. On the spot market back in April, paid 83 cents for a module. So while you've heard all the stories about all the solar companies in trouble, now's the time to buy. Personally, we ought to borrow all the money we possibly can from China and buy their Chinese subsidized PV and put them in the United States. By the way, that wouldn't happen very long because they'd move their price back up, okay? But hey, it solved the problem. Okay? There's different ways of looking at it, okay? Just to show you how these installed costs have been dropping. This is just for a 1.5-year time frame. First quarter of I guess it's 2 years. First quarter of 2010 to the first quarter of 2012. And you can see here that the residential installed cost of PV, no subsidies, no anything else, actual cost, $7 down to less than $6. And notice where the utilities are. We're down here into the 430s all the way down to 250, okay? Our long-term goal, as I told you, was to get this down to a watt. And our thought was that that would be in the 2020 time frame. I can just extrapolate this and tell you it's going to happen in 2 years. Okay? What's the key to that? Photovoltaics at the utility scale, okay, are going to be the same cost as a combined cycle natural gas plant. in 2016. Okay, so renewables, you know, they're alternatives anymore. The fossil fuels are. Okay, it's not the EPA that's killing coal, guys. It's the low price of natural gas. Okay, and I'm telling you, we're going to beat the low price of natural gas by 2016. Interesting way to look at it. Clearly, fossil fuels aren't the future for transportation fuels. Electrons are. We've got to get there. The sooner the better. Okay, that's the purpose of today's goal and your opportunity to get on the bus. This, just to put it in terms of what the typical residents might think of. They're not aware of what their electricity costs are. But this is what you paid as a resident out of the wall in the 90s. So we were flat here throughout the 90s through 2000. Okay? And then magically things started to change. Okay? There was competition throughout the world, not through the United States, on the use of fossil fuels. We used fossil fuels to go ahead and generate electricity. And sure enough, because of that increased demand throughout the world, not necessarily in Florida, the price of electricity started to go up. Magically, our demand, you all started putting compact fluorescent light bulbs in, by the way. Okay, actually, the demand went down all of a sudden the last couple of years, and look at that, the price has actually stabilized. So this is what you're paying out of the wall today. Okay, the black lines. I've just gone ahead and put, you know, two curves for it to extrapolate into the future. You can argue how well I am at predicting the future. Okay, but this dashed red line is just sort of a best fit to go through the data that occurred from 2000 to 2012, and the solid line includes all the data. At any rate, over time it appears that fossil fuels are going down. This is the cost of photovoltaics with the federal income tax credit. Clearly, back here in 1995, no way would you put PV on your roof. It was somewhere up there in cost. But look how fast this stuff is going down. And this is all based on data. You can always argue about how well I extrapolate, but this is what the prices have been doing. Okay? This is without any federal income tax credit. So you can argue where you think it changes, where you switch over. Okay? And keep in mind, other states may pay more for electricity. So the reason why New Jersey, okay, has more photovoltaics on its roof than the state of Florida isn't that this line changes, it's just that this line here has been moved up. And so sure enough, New Jersey puts photovoltaics on its roof because it's cheaper. They've been doing that for 2 years now. It's cheaper in New Jersey. It's not cheaper in Florida. So even though we're the Sunshine State, we don't put it on our roof because we've had relatively cheap electricity. But it's crossing. Okay? This is where I get your $1.08 a gallon. To go through, it's worth doing this simple calculation to show the efficiency here. The average car on the road today gets 25 miles per gallon at $3.25 a gallon. Okay, that, if I divide that into that turns out to be 13 cents a mile for the fuel cost to propel it, the vehicle, a mile. You take your electric cars, typically they get about 3 miles per kilowatt hour. Okay, right? Electricity from a photovoltaic, today's prices, okay, with the federal income tax credit, the levelized cost of electricity from that photovoltaic module is 13 cents a kilowatt hour. So I divide 3 into 13, and I get 4.3 cents a mile to move that electric vehicle down the road. You look at the ratio of the four to see, you can see here the gasoline costs in effect to produce the same mile driven 3 times as much. Or the cost of the fuel is roughly 1/3 the cost. So 325 divided by 3 is $1.08 a gallon. It's that simple, okay? The electric vehicles are real efficient. Electric buses are going to be more efficient than diesel-powered buses, okay? That's the beauty of using electricity. Now, I also mentioned to you that photovoltaics, and you should be aware that we have 10 megawatts of FPL-owned photovoltaics out on the Kennedy Space Center property. And the NASA itself controls another megawatt of photovoltaics on the property. Okay? More than enough electricity, by the way, to power any or all buses that you'd put on Kennedy Space Center. So you could effectively say, if you put electric buses out on Kennedy Space Center, they're all powered by the sun. And you got electricity left over, because they won't consume that much. Okay? But let's look at what I think the future might be for the price of gasoline. Back here in the 80s and 90s, okay, price of gasoline was constant over $1 a gallon. And I'll jab my presidential candidates again here. I really believe the Republicans like Ronald Reagan and the Democrats like Bill Clinton because during both of their administrations, the price of gasoline was about $1.15 a gallon. You're going to hate every president from now on, because it ain't going back. Okay? We've got to get off the stuff. Okay? This is the actual price dollars, these black lines. And, you know, I've even got it up to, I think, 2 weeks ago or something. Okay? So that little black dot is really what you paid, you know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it's been going down lately. I don't know if you know. The interesting thing is these brown lines are the actual average values for the year. It's interesting. Everybody remembers this day. This occurred during the Bush administration, where the price of gasoline got above $4 a gallon. Everybody remembers it. But the average for the year was only $3.25. Okay? It was just a bad time. Okay? You know, let's pretend it didn't happen. I think that's unfortunately what we're doing on a lot of things, pretending it doesn't happen. So this is where we're at. I did my calculations at $3.25. Now, you can argue where I think the future is here. Okay? But once again, I fitted a curve. I mean, to be honest with you, I think you'd all like to be paying $3.25 today. You're not. You're paying $3.49 across the street. It's a pretty good price. Okay? I'm telling you, based on this, you can pay $8.60 a gallon in the year 2025. You can argue with me any way you want. By the way, that's what they're paying in Europe today. This is our miles per gallon. This blue line. Okay, model year miles per gallon. Okay, so during the 50s, we were getting about 17 miles per gallon. We weren't including any light trucks in these numbers, by the way, at that time. Okay, we started to add a little bit more trucks in, so the average went down. Then magically the Arab oil embargo showed up, and oh my gosh, the price of gasoline is going up through the roof. Maybe we better come up with more efficient cars. So sure enough, we did. Came up with more efficient cars. Okay, dropped a little bit because we started adding more trucks and other kind of things in here, and then we stayed flat. Now, in fairness to the automobile manufacturers, as we went from here to here, as I said earlier, we doubled the weight, okay, and then we also doubled the horsepower. Okay, the black line here is the average. These are cars, the blue. The black line here is the average, which includes cars and light trucks. So you can see that we didn't really include light trucks until we started here, and then, of course, that lowered it. And then this is the predicted value. You may have heard this, that the automobile manufacturers all got together holding hands with the president a couple of years ago and agreed to a 54.5 mile per gallon standard in the year 2025. Okay? This is what you paid for gasoline back in the 50s. Remember, we added unleaded gasoline on top here and moved along, and then this is what we've been seeing for the last several years. And so this is that same red line that I showed you before. I just put on this plot. Okay. Now what have I done? I've gone ahead and taken every model year, miles per gallon, taken the price of gasoline at that year, divided them through, and come up with the fuel cost per mile driven. And here you can see what it is. So back in the 60s, it was 2 cents to drive a mile. Remember, I told you today it's 13 cents. Okay, when I showed you that reverse graphic. So this is what you're paying to drive your car if you had the given model year based on the price. And unfortunately, okay, even though the cars start to get more efficient as we go out into 2025, based on my projection, the price of gasoline gets up to $8.60. So the price of gasoline is going up faster than we're making more efficient cars. Okay, and as you can imagine, the 54.5 is mostly electric cars anyhow, showing in the fleet as we move into the future. I did the same thing then with the cost of photovoltaics. Okay, so this is a photovoltaic powering today's given electric car. Personally, I think all the electric cars will be more efficient too, but I'm using today's efficiencies on electric cars. And you can see that while we haven't hit grid parity with photovoltaics on your roof to make electricity for your house, we hit gasoline parity a bunch of years ago. We didn't have the electric cars. We had the PV, we just didn't have the electric cars. Now we got the electric cars. Now we got the electric buses. Okay? And you can see this is where we're at. Oops. This is where we're at if you use electricity out of the wall on those electric cars compared to your gasoline-powered car. Here's where we use with the federal income tax credit, okay, the green dot. And in 2016, this is when the federal income tax credit expires, and I'll move up here and pay this price. So without any subsidies whatsoever, I can pay less than $1 a gallon. No president's going to give you that. Vote for me.